various other bits of social media as well. But if you do want to follow more of these, it's probably worth following the link at the top and signing up on Haps, because that will give a more integrated experience. Anyway, what I've got to do today is have a look at a few of the moths that we recorded down here last night. I ran a series of 5 moth traps. There's a few large boxes with lights on top. The moths are attracted to the light, they go in. And then first thing this morning, I go and have a look at what was there, part of an ongoing survey of this site, PerivaleWood, here in northwest London. So I will go through, show you a few of the moths that we caught, explain a little bit about them, and a little bit about where they are on this reserve. And we will see. So, wasn't the best of nights for moth trapping last night. I had to be down here anyway, so it was a convenient night for me to trap. It got down to probably about 2 degrees, 1 or 2 degrees by first thing in the morning, which was a little bit chilly, and probably reduced the number of things we could have got. But we got a variety of species, and we got some things that are quite nice for this area, if not extraordinarily rare for sort of the general world. So we'll have a look through and see a few of the species we've got. So we'll just start to get out of this bag. So turn the camera around and we'll start with this moth. That's not going to focus, is it? Okay, I will do something different to see if I can make it focus. So this moth, if you've seen the previous broadcast, you'll have seen before, is a Hebrew character. Goes by the scientific name Orthosia gothica. Gothica probably refers to the mark on the wing, looking a bit like a Gothic character. A lot of people giving it the vernacular, the English name, preferred to call it, thought it looked more like a character in the Hebrew alphabet. Hello Isa, thanks for the award, that's really appreciated. So this is, yes, Hebrew character moth, one of the commonest moths we get in our traps at this time of the year, and even not pretty much on the coldest days would get this one. It's a fairly general feeder, feeds on a variety of herbaceous plants, trees, things like that, which is probably why it's common. So that's the first one. Let me go and grab something else out of my bag. There's an art to doing this, which I still have to work out, of course. So this one, I will briefly open the pot. This is, just give me a second, trying to do everything at once. I really don't want this one to get away. Go and have a look at this one sitting down here. Let me try that angle. So this is another in that genus Orthosia that we were just looking at before. It's got a common genus at this type of guy. I do need a glamorous assistant, Fiona, but sadly we're not allowed to meet at the moment. Fiona, in non-pestilential times, does often join me running moth traps here, but obviously at the moment that's rather difficult. This is powdered quaker, Orthosia gracilis. I don't get this every year. It's not an extremely rare moth. And it's, I did make a note of what it feeds on. It's another one that feeds on quite a wide variety of things. But close up it has a lot of small spotty dots on its wing. I don't see this very often. So I'm going to try and keep this one in a pot and do some proper photography later. But this is a species, this is a cheat actually. I got this from the site next door, from Horsenden Hill next door, where I went for a walk after dark. Again, it's a common enough species really. It feeds on a variety of plants, so that helps it be common. This one is rather waking up, but I'll let it go in the net and we'll see if I can show you what it is. Whoops. Go on, sit down there. Right, an actively moving about moth called Lunar marbled brown. And it doesn't want to behave itself, does it? It really wants to be climbing up there where it's hard for me to focus on. Just give me a second to play around with the device. Come on, there we go. Well, we can see it at the back. No, I'll try and do that. I'll try zooming in. Let's see if that works any better. Not on there, it's not. That's the moth there. It says Lunar marbled brown. I didn't actually write down its scientific name. That was rather careless of me, so I'm going to have to look it up so I can tell people what it is whilst holding this here. Quite a furry moth, quite a dense moth. Unlike cute stripes, and you might be able to see in one of the stripes there's a little mark like a crescent moon, which is why they call it Lunar marbled brown. Let me see if I can find. There we go. I'm just looking it up in the field guide. I'll show you my field guide in a minute. Lunar marbled brown, which is Daimonia ruficonis. There's a picture of it in the field guide. If I zoom out a bit. And this is one of the field guides to moths in the United Kingdom. It's quite a useful book, quite a manageable group to work on. Let me just go and see what else I can find in my bag. Another of the orthosias that we were looking at before, coming up here. We'll do this one out here. Oops, where am I? This is the small quaker. It's another in that genus Orthosia. And a lot of the Orthosia genus, this one doesn't really show it very well, have a straight line on the outer edge of the wing down here. And that's same sort of word as orthogonal, and that's why they call that, that genus the Orthosias. This is small quaker or Orthosia cruda, and again it's another of those common things. Its main food plant is oak, which there's a lot of in this reserve. I just put them off in my container, and what I'm doing, I'm putting them in this net box so they don't fly off. Another Orthosia. We're getting well Orthosiaed in this trap, in this session. So this moth in here, you can probably see that straight line towards the outer edge of the wing, towards the bottom of the tube there, which is where the name Orthosia comes from. And this is one we call the common quaker, Orthosia cersei, cersai. Another extremely common moth at this time of year, feeds on large variety of tree species. And that's quite often is the way. Things that feed on a lot of species of food plant tend to be more common because there's loads of places they can live. So this is one of our commonest, again, one of the common moths that we get in this time of year. And rather nice. I'll put it also in this container. Oops, there we go, back into our container. And what else have I got in here? Another lunar marble. Another of the Orthosias. They really are the commonest of them. The commonest of the genuses at this time of year. Where am I? There I am. This is clouded drab. I've forgotten the name of that one as well. It's another in the genus Orthosia though. I didn't track, the sallow's largely gone over, Fiona. One of the things we do here, sallow is a species of tree, the willow type trees, and they blossom early, and quite often early in the year, if you put your moth trap under the tree, or if you just go and look along the blossoms after dark, there are a lot of moths using it. So this is clouded drab. This is Orthosia incertae. incerta, I-N-C-E-R-T-A. It's another of our relatively common species. It feeds on quite a variety of trees, probably mainly oaks and mainly sallows, but it does feed on one or two others as well. And that's another of our nice species. There is a somewhat similar one called the lead-coloured drab, which you tell the difference by the structure of the antennae. I did check this earlier, so this one is as I thought it was. Just looked clouded drab. The lead-coloured drab on this site at least is much less common. This is the last of our noctuid moths, I think. I'm not going to let this one out of the pot, so we're going to have to look at it through glass, I'm afraid. But this is the dotted chestnut. This is regarded nationally as a scarce moth here in the United Kingdom. It seems to have been having a bit of a population expansion recently, but we haven't recorded it that often on this site. Scientific name is Conistra rubigana. It feeds on apples, apple trees rather than the fruit itself, but the leaves and so on of apple trees, and sometimes on plants in the Prunus genus. And it is a nationally scarce species. Let me just see if I can work out when I first captured it in the United Kingdom. That's it. It's a Conistra rubigana. Oops. Let me see if I can. This is where it gets difficult because I have to remember all sorts of numbers to look things up in various books. So I will try and hold this here. Dotted chestnut, 320. Oops, still on there, yes. So I'm just looking it up to remind myself of its index number. So all of the species in Britain that have been categorised have been given what's called a logbook number, which is essentially a unique number that refers to them. And that allows us to look up the species in other books and see when it was recorded. It must be about there. So, Dotted Chestnut was recorded. This is a book I pulled together of the records from this reserve. That species was recorded first time in this reserve in March 2015. Yeah, it was a good guess. I think that's about right. That's the spelling there. And according to this book, it's only been recorded once, but this book only runs up to records to 2015. This is my account. Oops. Of I'm not sure we can see all of that. Let me see. Let me just. If I stand up and do that, this is my account of the Lepidoptera of this reserve, which I've pulled together from all our records. The site's had recording for a long time, so I wanted to write up an account of all the recording that others, and more recently myself, have done, and see what we've got. I'm going to keep this in a pot because I want to take some nice photographs of this later with my proper camera. Slightly worried if I let it out, it'll go and have a fly away. One or two more, and then we are largely done. So, this one's behaving reasonably well. This is a brindled beauty. It's quite a bulky moth. It's actually in the Geometridae, which a lot of the geometrid moths are rather more flimsy in appearance. So a lot of the geos are more flimsy. This early flying species is quite bulky. So brindle beauty, that's Lycia hirtaria, Lycia hirtaria, I think. And it's quite bulky. It always looked to me like it's a geo that's decided to put on a woolly jumper so it can stay out in the cold evenings. Which is rather nice. So that's one of the brindle beauty. We had a few of them. They're a species that's been increasing in population recently. I think it's been here for quite a while. Oops. A very active moth. Well, this is a brindled pug. Eupathia abbreviata. I will see if this sits still when I let it go in here. Oops, it's sitting right on the outside, being really awkward. No, no, flown away. You always lose some. That one escaped. That was one of the pug moths. The pug moths are quite a tricky group of geometrid moths to identify. But this early in the year, there are only a few on the wing. There's that, there's oak tree pug, and there's double striped pug, which is rather nice. Then the other major division of moths, it's slightly arbitrary, between the large moths and the small moths. And this, will it focus? No. This is a Micromoth. Quite a small moth, you can see it next to my hands. I should probably have cleaned my nails before doing this. It's a problem with being outgoing in the natural world, you keep getting dirty nails. This is Dysereocrania subperpavella. It's one of the species, the caterpillars of which mine the leaves of oak trees. So the caterpillars live between the top and the bottom surface of an oak tree. And yes, rather a nice micro. Didn't get many micros last night. This is one of them. I've got one more micro, which is probably the last moth we'll have a look at. And then another Micromoth. Oops, where is it? Can we see that? Light's in the way. Well, this looks. This is Aganopteryx Avanella. Yes, the Dysereocrania subperpavella was just potted up in the morning. It was one of the advantages of it being a cold morning, of course, is they're quite slow and sluggish. This one that we're looking at now, Aganopteryx Avanella, I netted and on the wing, flying around in the woods. So there were some of the moths. What I thought I'd do now is go for a quick walk into the woods and show you where the habitat in which we were collecting these things. So I'm going to head off and do that. I'll not be long. I'm just going to quickly seal up the container to keep the moths safe from all the birds that might want to eat them. Whilst I'm doing that, and I'll put the ones I'm keeping in pots down there, and I'll just put this down out of the way into the shade to stop the things getting cooked whilst I'm away, because you've got to look after your specimens if you're keeping them alive. But then I thought I'd just quickly walk into PerivaleWood. We won't go very far. This broadcast might go very pixely and briefly break up as I walk off the Wi-Fi and onto the cellular data. But one of the nice things about HAPS is it can sort of cope with that, which when I used to broadcast on Periscope, if I tried to do something like this, I would just lose the broadcast. This should just pick up again once it's back on the cellular data. Give it a go anyway. Yes, Fiona's sceptical of the technology. So far, it's not telling me there's a problem here. Of course, I've got no way of telling if you guys are actually seeing anything. Anyway, here we are in the entrance to PerivaleWood. It's a nice sunny day. You can see lots of the bluebells out. It's all good. Thanks, Fiona. See the bluebells out. Bluebells are probably the plant that this wood's most famed for. We'll stop and have a look at some of them because they're pretty. They're a really lovely plant. And this place is where I spend probably far more of my time than I should. Little bit of woodland, a little bit of countryside surrounded by London, really. Surrounded by the London suburbs. And been looked after as a nature reserve since early part of the 20th century, really. It's all written that it's been explicitly for those places looking after the nature that's there. But this was one of the places where people looked at hunting and said, actually, it's really, really important for it. With people, share here in London, and you've recorded. So moths that we were talking about earlier today. The first moths they with the moths lighter, and that means that we've got quite a long period of time. We can see she's surviving. I just found the edge of the Wi-Fi. The edge of the. I'm way beyond the edge of the Wi-Fi. I've found a rubbish bit of signal. Let's walk on until it tells me I've got a good signal again. I'd be amazed if the Wi-Fi this far into the wood. Right, it's now telling me I've got a great signal, so I'm hoping you can again see me. One of the things you find when you're doing these broadcasts on the foot is you get to map out where the good and the bad cellular data signal is. And yes, with managing the wood for a long time, we start to notice things that happen. So what we've got here is a patch of holly. And if you go back to when we were mapping this wood, when I wasn't, I'm not that old, when this wood was being mapped in the 1960s and even into the 1980s, I think, when they were mapping it, they actually marked out each individual holly tree as a thing to notice, as being worth observing. And now there is so much of it, we're having to actually manage this, otherwise it will just completely darken the understory, darken the underneath of the wood. And as you can see, nothing grows underneath the holly, so the bluebells basically stop there because it's dark all the time. So you get that real interesting continuity when you manage a place for this long. And yeah, this is basically where I had my traps scattered through the reserve last night. I slept down here. I slept in one of our buildings rather than sleeping out in the wood because it was going to get a bit cold. But on a warm night, I might well just chuck a sleeping bag out on this path here and sleep out whilst I'm looking for insects. The reserve's locked, it's gated, so it's relatively secure to do that. There's plenty of places I wouldn't just chuck a sleeping bag and go to sleep on the path, particularly in London. But there we are. Anyway, what I think we'll do is we'll end probably just here, have a look at some of our bluebells because they're really pretty. And I said what I'm trying to do this year is, when I've done a moth trap here, do broadcasts and show people some of the species we've got. So I hope people found that useful. Thanks Issa and Fiona for commenting and engaging. That's really appreciated. And thanks Issa for the awards. All the money from awards and so on that I get on HAPS, when I work out how to get it off HAPS, will be shared between this charity and probably London Natural History Society, which I'm involved with. So it's not money for me. And if the taxman's watching, it really isn't money for me. It's going to go to charity. That's it. And yes, parakeets shouting. Right, I'll leave us on the bluebells, and I hope people enjoy.